of the freedoms we have in the Constitution is self-executing. Yet, there ought to be an enabling law to be able for us to implement such freedoms given to us by the Constitution. To the honorable members, esteemed guests, and resource persons, a very pleasant morning to all of you. We have a full plate of measures for the thorough consideration of this committee. These include the initial deliberations on the Magna Carta on freedom of religion or belief, as proposed in House Bill number 278, authored by Representative LRAY Villafuerte and Villafuerte, and Representatives Horibata and Enciso, and House Bill number 2213, authored by our Vice Chairperson, Brother Eddie Villanueva. And next would be the initial deliberation on Human Rights Defenders Protection Act, subject matter of House Bill number 77, authored by Representative Lagman, House Bill number 256 and 2484, authored by Representative Manuel, Castro, and Brosas, and House Bill number 4124, authored by Representative Salo. As we delve into the significant issues in this meeting, let me highlight some pertinent constitutional and legal bases which support this bill. The state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights as declared under Section 2, Section 11, Article 2 of the Constitution. Further, Section 5, Article 3 explicitly provides that, and I quote, no law shall be made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and worship without discrimination or preference shall forever be allowed. No religious test shall be required for the exercise of civil and political rights. End of quote. And the rights to life, liberty, and property without due process of law and the equal protection of the laws are also primordial under the fundamental law of the land, of which I believe to be the higher laws of freedom that we ought to protect. In a plethora of cases, the Supreme Court has affirmed that, as I quote, equal protection simply requires that all persons or things similarly situated should be treated alike, both as to rights conferred and responsibilities imposed. It requires public bodies and institutions to treat similarly situated individuals in a similar manner. End of quote. Ang ibig kong sabihin nito, hindi tayo pwede mag-accord ng rights sa iba at ating pong ibababa ang karapatan ng iba. Ibig sabihin, lahat, anuman ang ating pagkakilala, lahat ay dapat bigyan ng kanilang karapatan. Ito po ang stand ng Chairperson ng Committee on Human Rights. As elucidated in Article 22 of the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, again I quote, every person has the right to freedom of thought. Please take note, it says every person. Okay? Iba po yan pag sinabi natin all persons. Iba yan in language and grammar. Di ba? Every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Tanggalin po natin ng freedom ng conscience, religion. Wala na po tayong freedom dito. Kahit meron tayong freedom sa iba, tanggalin natin ang kalayaan na sumamba at manampalataya sa Diyos at yung ating konsyensya. ay walang kwenta na ang freedom na binibigay natin sa iba. Alright. So, sabihin ko din, as I quote, all forms of intolerance, discrimination, and incitement of hatred based on religion and belief shall be eliminated. Yan po ang Article 22 of the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, hopefully that all countries in the ASEAN would implement and believe in. At the level of the United Nations, mechanisms have been put in place to express strong commitments to protect the right to freedom of religion or belief, such as the Rabat Plan of Action, the Beirut Declaration and 18 Commitments on Faith for Rights, and the Plan of Action for Religious Leaders to prevent incitement to violence that could lead to atrocity crimes. But while the right to thought, conscience, and religion is fully guaranteed by human rights law, the guarantee does not extend to external manifestations in the exercise of one's religion or belief, which could then be regulated by the state. It must be posited that the free exercise clause stipulated in the Constitution is not a blatant license to commit violation against criminal laws, public morals, or public policy. Ibig sabihin ito, kung meron tayong relihiyon na nagsusupport sa rebellion, ay hindi po natin papayagan yan. Tama mo ba ako? Alright. On the other major issue, human rights defenders, have faced serious challenges to their advocacy work. We can no longer turn a blind eye on these injustices which undermine our democratic space and perpetuate a culture of impunity. To have the resource persons from the AFP. All right. According to the Philippine Inquirer headline, Protestant leaders claim being red tagged by the AFP. I would like to find out from you if this is true. Because there are pastors and lay leaders of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, named the military chief, other armed forces officers, men in writ of amparo petition before the Supreme Court. The armed forces does not have any authority to wreak that. They can investigate. They can investigate. They can act, even go to court against them. Pero wag naman yung red tag. Wag naman yung red tag. Nire-red tag lang yung mga hindi na kinakain. Right? Now, in the 2022 Rule of Law Index, which is annually published by the World Justice Project, the Philippines ranks 97 out of 140 countries, signifying its dismal performance on the adherence to the rule of law. This index includes factors indicating constraints on government power, respect for fundamental rights, civil and criminal justice, and several others. The rule of law, in its universally accepted definition, it states that, I quote, the people, including the government, should be ruled by the law and obey it, and that the law should be such that people will be able and are willing to be guided by it. Simply put, no one is above the law. We don't even care who they are. No one is above the law. Hence, I make this clarion call to action. for the Interagency Committee on Extralegal Killing and Forced Disappearances, torture, and other grave violations of the rights to life, liberty, and security of persons created under Administrative Order Number 35, 2012. To reinvigorate its clear mandate to investigate and prosecute cases of such human rights violations and restore the rule of law. May I say, the Committee on Human Rights in the House of Representatives will not sit down in silence. We are going to speak up.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Even if some media network would bash me, I am going to speak up on what I believe in. Finally, before we spur the momentum for this hearing, let me go into some procedural guidelines. The order of speakers shall be in this manner. Authors would first be recognized, to be followed by government agencies and the non-governmental organization. Authors and members are allowed at any point during the deliberations to manifest their motions, ideas, and preferences. Each resource person, except the members, is allowed only a maximum time of 5 minutes to convey their official position on the measure, to ensure that every guest is given the opportunity to be heard in this meeting. The committee secretariat has also prepared matrices of bills for discussion purposes. Unless there are pertinent questions, the chair is now ready to open the deliberations for this meeting. Thank you and good morning. Committee secretary.
Please write this now.
Yes, please. Don't recognize.
Walang gamit lahat.
We have Representative Adio. Just came in present because of their face-to-face. Okay, I would like to recognize Congressman Manuel for his sponsorship. Please,
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Also to my fellow members of the House, to all resource persons, magandang umaga. As one of the authors of House Bills 256 and 2484, Mr. Chair, I'd like to sponsor these measures by quoting from our explanatory note. Mr. Chair, the Philippine government was one of the 48 original signatories to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. The government later signed and ratified the multilateral treaties on human rights, namely the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. These official acts of the Republic of the Philippines are a commitment that the government shall not only respect human rights, but must also protect and promote these rights. Despite these commitments, human rights violations continue to plague the Philippines. The international community, including the United Nations, has expressed serious concern over the systematic and continuing violations of human rights, including the phenomena of extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. It is within this context that the need for and the importance of human rights defenders coming from human rights groups and advocates came to the fore. In July 2012, UN Special Rapporteurs Margaret Segovia for Human Rights Defenders and Christoph Gaines for extrajudicial killings voiced their concern on the significant increase in the reports of killings and death threats against human rights defenders in the Philippines. These attacks on human rights defenders were by no means limited to the Philippines. Despite the international recognition of what is known today as the International Bill of Human Rights, many countries not only continue to violate the rights of their people, but also attack human rights workers and advocates who criticize governments for human rights abuses. The Philippines is the second highest in killings of human rights defenders worldwide, according to the 2015 report of Frontline Defenders, or the International Foundation for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders. The Philippines is second to Colombia and the highest outside the Americas. According to the report, the 31 killings of HRDs in the Philippines in 2015 make up almost 60% of the 52 recorded in Asia and the Pacific. Considering the important role of human rights defenders in the protection of human rights in the country, and the Philippine government's international commitment to promote, defend, and protect human rights, and the continuing attack on the rights of the people and HRVs, it is imperative that the Congress should put into law that commitment as enshrined in the UN General Assembly resolutions on the rights of HRVs. It is necessary that the relevant provisions of the International Declaration are translated into a binding commitment to protect not only human rights but also those who work to defend these rights, so that they may be able to fulfill their important role in society. In this light, Mr. Chair, a law protecting human rights defenders and penalizing any violations of their rights in the pursuance of their advocacy must be immediately enacted. First filed in the House of Representatives by Bienvenido representatives Sotoro Campo during the 14th Congress, this bill or these bills are filed in the 16th up to the 18th Congresses by representatives of the Makabayang Coalition ng Mamamayan. It was unanimously approved on third reading on January 17 of this year. In that light, Mr. Chair, again, I'm pleased to sponsor House Bills 256 and 2484. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Manuel of the Kabataan Party List. You have, I think, four bills of the same nature. Do we have the other sponsor to do it? Yeah, I just would like to read the letter that Congressman Lagman wrote this, and I would like this to put on record. Okay. Dear Chairman Abante, I truly appreciate your honors expeditiously setting for consideration by the Committee on Human Rights of House Bill number 77 on defining the rights and fundamental freedoms of human rights defenders, declaring a state responsibility and instituting effective mechanisms for the protection and promotion of these rights and freedoms, of which I am the principal author. Much as I would like to be physically present during the meeting scheduled for November 29, 2022 at 10 a.m., I am constrained to honor a previously set meeting with the Age Healthcare Foundation in Park Executive Representative Health Boxing Testwork at the same time in Makati City. With leave of the chairman of the committee, may I be allowed to use my sponsorship message a control note of House Bill number 77. May I underscore that identical bill, House Bill number 9199 and House Bill number 10576, on the protection of human rights defenders have been respectively approved on third and final reading by the House of Representatives during 17th Congress. Consequently, pursuant to our rules, House Bill number 77 be accorded a pass claim by the Committee on Human Rights so that it can be referred to soonest plenary consideration. Thank you and warmest personal regard, Congressman S. Lagman. All right, so that would be on the record. Now let us hear now the others who speak to have the position on it.
Yes, Mr. Chair. May we first recognize the representative from the Philippine National Police, Police Brigadier General Vincent Calanoga.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. From the Philippine National Police and also to the members of the committee present in this hall and those virtually attending this activity. May we submit for the committee's attention the statement from our organization. The protection of human rights in our country is guaranteed by no less than the 1987 Constitution. Accordingly, the state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. The PNP is a community and service-oriented agency that promotes and respects human rights while upholding the rule of law. As advocates and protectors of human rights, the PNP is duty-bound to protect and safeguard these rights, as well as secures their continued exercise and enjoyment thereof. The PNP has since then adopted a proactive measure to effectively address human rights issues. In addition to our previous submissions, it is worthy to include the following. The Philippines is a government of laws and not of men. No less than the Philippine Constitution protects and promotes the human rights of all people, to include those human rights defenders. Landmark legislation and on the protective of victims from human rights violations, as well as protection and security of persons advocating for human rights, are in place. Further, Administrative Order number 35, of which the PNP is a member, and help in the investigation and resolution of grave human rights violation. Second, human rights obligation is universal and concerns all both state and non-state actors. Protecting and promoting human rights is not only the obligation of the state actors, but is also the obligation that can be properly observed by non-state actors. It is also noteworthy to emphasize the UN fact sheet number 29, wherein it clearly states that advocates, such as civil society organization, should not contribute to the improvement of social, political, and economic conditions, the reduction of social and political tension, the building of peace, domestically and internationally, and the nurturing of national and international awareness of human rights. Hence, human rights defenders should not support armed struggles, but instead they should contribute to the reduction of social and political tensions in our society, building of peace both domestically and internationally, and not to promote conflict and armed struggles. The PNP, Your Honor, objects the enactment of Human Rights Defenders Act for the simple reason that our existing laws are already sufficient to protect human rights defenders. Per definition prescribed by the UN under fact sheet number 29, it includes not only volunteers, civil organizations, but also government employees, state actors, who promotes, protects, and advocates human rights as human rights defenders. And we also consider ourselves in the security sector as human rights defenders, and perhaps even a diligent father or a mother can also be considered as human rights defenders because they are promoting the welfare of their children, protecting them from harm and abuses, which is by nature a human rights violation. Thank you, Your Honor.
Director Ardo, may I know the laws that you are pertaining about human rights defenders? May I know? General Plano. Ano ko si... May I know, please, can you cite to us some of the laws that you said that are already enshrined in our statute to protect human rights defenders? May I know?
Yes, sir. We have practically, Your Honor, we have the whole of the revised penal code.
Oh, you don't say that. May I know the pertinent laws in the revised penal code for human rights defenders? Can you cite to me one?
Yes, sir. Arbitrary detention is one, Your Honor.
That is not a law for human rights defenders,
But it gives protection for everybody.
but it is not a law on human rights defenders. Please, we're not stupid here. I think you heard my remark. Am I right?
Yes, Your Honor.
I think that you agree with all of my remarks.
I totally agree, Your Honor.
All right. So we are all against any armed struggle here. We are all against anyone that would run in conflict with the government. Diba?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, but listen, may pagkakataon din naman ng mga tao to speak contrary to what the government is. That's freedom. Am I right?
Totally agree, Your Honor.
If you agree with that, then you agree with the Human Rights Defenders Act. Ano lang yun? Natin yun ulit. Please, study. I'm gonna give you my remark. I want you to study it because you are the part of the human rights community of the Philippine National Police. And therefore, General, you should agree with us. You should agree with us. We are not here to agree with you because we are the one that make laws. Am I right?
Well taken, Your Honor.
You execute the law. We make the laws, and therefore you should agree with us more than us agreeing with you.
We submit to your opinion.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Chair.
Good morning and blessed day to everyone. First of all, I would like to appreciate so much the opening remarks of Chairman Abante, the chairman of this prestigious Committee on Human Rights. I absolutely believe that the real essence of genuine freedom in our country must be given flesh and substance. I also, I would say, understand the presentation of Honorable General from PNP, and I believe that this is the best time in the history of our country to effectuate genuine system of, I would say, implementing, enforcing the rule of law. Because in my experience, last regime under President Rodrigo Duterte, I admired his presidential proclamation speech when he said, and I quote, "My adherence to due process and rule of law is non-compromising," unquote. I was encouraged to congratulate him in tweet. Kudos to the new president. But after that, there were reported several extrajudicial killings. I visited that young teenagers in the Santos with Bishop Ray Altonga and other Christian leaders. And we were shocked to hear from the people, from the community, there were so many extrajudicial killings aside from the case. So what I mean, it appears the presidential proclamation of President Duterte that his adherence to due process and rule of law is non-compromising is not actually being respected by some quote-unquote scalawags in the police system. And I believe the principal genuine members of the police system are very sincere in fulfilling their sacred duty in protecting the rights of the sovereign Filipino people, but in reality, there are so many violations. That's why I would like to take this opportunity to remind our Honorable Chairman, Congressman Benny Abante, if this committee could initiate a genuine, no-nonsense investigation on the so-called extrajudicial killings in the past, so that because I can feel the heartbeat of God, that when innocent people are being killed simply because of political reason, this is a direct assault and direct rebellion to the Almighty God, who is properly enshrined in the very preamble of the Philippine Constitution, and I quote, "We, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of the Almighty God, so that we can have genuine peace, development, progress, eventually resulting to the genuine prosperity of our people." So this is just my simple reminder to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for the edit. If you would be willing to file a resolution to investigate for the edit, it might fall under initial killing. Because even now, the new administration is very proud of saying that they only had very minimal deaths in the drug war. Pag ibig sabihin nun, pag minimal yung nangyayari ngayon sa drug war, mali yung ginawa na dating administrasyon. I think is this, Mr. General, bilang kayo ang nasa human right, dapat lamang ipatayan nyo ang Philippine National Police. You said that we are a government of law and not of land. True. Wag nawa sa Philippine National Police, you become a government of guns. You don't want that. Di ba? So, naniniwala ka to. It's a human rights committee ka ng Philippine National Police. O, sabi mo sa akin, you agree with everything I said in that my preliminary remark. Therefore, I want you to go back and study, because this human rights bill or human rights defenders bill we are tackling right now is to give flesh to the structure of the body. Sabihin, pag nakita mo yung katawan, puro-puro lang yan, nagbigay ka na ilustrasyon kanina eh. Pag yung nagkatawan, puro buto lang yan, wen ka. Itong kongreso, nilalagyan natin ng flesh, ang butong yan. Pinubuo natin para maging maganda ang katawan ng tao. Tama mo ba ako? The Human Rights Defenders Bill is one beautiful bill if enacted. We protect all human rights defenders. And by the way, Mr. General, I was also violated by the Philippine National Police at one time. Hindi ko na kinakailangan sabihin sa inyo kung ano nangyari. Pero alam nyo, palaging overkill kayo. Nagkakaroon kayo pag sinabi ng Pangulo na huli nyo ito. Ang ibang mga pulis natin, hindi naman lahat. Ang ibang pulis natin, nagiging excited yan. At gumagawa na ng mga bagay na hindi ayon sa batas. For example, tama ba na isang katulad ko na congressman ay i-stop ng pulis sa isang bayan na dala-dala ang kanilang mga baril at mga SWAT at walang pangalan, kanilang mga uniforme. Tama ba o mali? Tama o mali?
Mali ka.
Mali. So, ito yung pinag-uusapan natin dito. Yan ang substance ng bill na pinag-uusapan natin. Maraming salamat sa inyong mga sinabi. Yes, go ahead, Vice Chair. Gusto ko lang, any congressman would like to say something about this issue.
Gusto ko lang pong ipaalala, lalo na sa kinatawan ng Philippine National Police. Kung ating pong susuriin ang mga pangyayari sa ating bansa, objectively, motivated by genuine love for our country, dapat matuwa po ang kabuuan ng Philippine National Police. Why? Dito sa bill na ito, panukalang batas, in giving sufficient protection sa protectors ng human rights, yung pong mga good elements sa Philippine National Police, which I believe the vast majority of in the Philippine National Police, the vast majority are sincere in their sacred duty to accomplish their noble task in their earthly existence. Nadadamay sila sa ilang mga scalawags. Nadadamay sila sa ilang mga police elements na gusto magpasikat. Gusto magawa ng mga quote-unquote radical changes resulting many times to extrajudicial killings just for promotion, just to flatter their superiors. What about the vast majority of policemen? I talked to many of them. They confess to me that they have, this is supposed to be confidential, but our aim here is to really create a genuine civilized society that could pave the way for genuine peace, the peace that is indispensable in the development of our country, because without the genuine development, there can be no genuine economic growth and progress. And without economic growth and progress, it is impossible for the masses of people to experience genuine prosperity for all. So, in conclusion, let us discuss this bill giving protection to the human rights protectors objectively, seriously, at kung may mga provisions na mga makikita na pwedeng gawin, pwedeng maging abuso in persecuting good elements of the Philippine National Police, hindi po natin papayagan yun. Importante, talagang balansyado ang pagbibigay ng karapatan sa bawat isa. Ito po ay aking nila sa puso ko dahil alam ko maganda intensyon ng ating general representing the interests of the Philippine Police at napakaganda rin ang intention ng mga sponsors itong bills nito. So in other words, magkaisang-usapan tayo na makakrap ng most ideal law that will protect genuine human rights of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. You know, meron akong apo 5 years old. I'm trying to change his mind. Every time I ask him, what do you want to be when you grow up? Same answer every time. 5 years old yan, ha? I want to be a police officer. Tatakot ako pag yun. Tukot niya pinapanood kong iba. Pero you know what, ha? Believe siya sa kapulisan natin. I would ask him, why do you want to be a police officer? To protect. Sabi niya, to protect our people from gangsters and criminals. 5 years old yan, General. 5 years old. Diba? Mukhang yung mga pulis nating iba, hindi alam kung bakit sila pulis. Buti pa yung 5 years old. Okay, Manuel. I would like to recognize Congressman Busita of the One Rider Party List. Ang kalaban ng mga sabihin mo. Congressman Manuel, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pasensya na po sa lahat. Galing po ako sa isang committee hearing. Thank you po.
Yeah. Share a quick response lang doon sa nabanggit ng ating resource person. Isang bagay po yung na-mention na sapat na yung mga current na batas natin. Kaya hindi na kailangan ng isang Human Rights Defenders Bill. Pero Mr. Chair, the mere fact na meron tayong nasa-cite ng mga datos, the mere fact na may mga nababanggit na experiences ng mga ganong paglabag dun sa karapatan, hindi lamang ng ating mga kababayan, pero pati ng mga nagtatanggol din sa ating mga kababayan, yun yung nag-justify na kailangan natin ng ganitong tipo ng batas. Also, Mr. Chair, dun din sa paano ba natin talaga na-define yung sinasabing human rights violations. Kung nabasa po nung ating mga resource persons yung definition ng human rights violation na nasa ating bill ay na-specify po dito, Mr. Chair, na human rights violation is any act of commission or omission by state actors acting under the orders of and or with acquiescence of state actors. Simply put, Mr. Chair, kailangan na meron tayong mga pamamaraan para naman na merong mapuntahan o merong masisilungan ng ating mga kababayan kung ang lumabag sa kanilang karapatan ay state actors. Kasi halimbawa, kung mga krimen yan na hindi naman state actors yung gumawa, nandyan na mismo yung ating law enforcement agencies to protect us. Pero paano kung, halimbawa, bahagi ng law enforcement agency yung nagkamali o may nakomit na abuso? And that exactly is the purpose of this bill. Kaya hopefully throughout our discussion, maging malinaw yung ganong definition para hindi natin ma-blur yung urgency at yung pangangailangan. And I also am glad, Sir Chair, na nabanggit yung posibilidad na mas malalim pa na tingnan yung mga usapin din regarding our approach to the drug war. Kasi sa bahagi din ng representasyon na ito, naivalid po natin yung House Resolution number 14 na exactly yun po yung kanyang objective. And kung sa kailan din po natin yan pwedeng mapag-usapan o matibol, yan naman po ay nasa jurisdiction ng committee na ito at we will be very welcome to cooperate with that. Yun muna, Mr. Chair.
Salamat, Professor Manuel. Gusto ko rin i-comment ang DLLG, no? Sa Secretary Benarado and the Philippine National Police on your new title requirement, PDAP. Okay yan. I hope that can be fully implemented. Yan ang aming prayer dito. Mr. General.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very much appreciated. It meant so much to us.
Okay.
Maybe request Brigadier General Joel Alejandro S. Naknak from the Armed Forces of the Philippines Center on Federal Armed Conflict.
Sa mga kagalang-galang na chairman at members ng Committee Human Rights sa Kongreso, mga kasama ko rito, magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Ako po si Brigadier General Joel Alejandro S. Naknak, ang direktor ng AFP Center for Law of Armed Conflict. Dati po itong pangalan niya ay Human Rights Office of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, which was established way back in 2007. At gusto kong bigyan muna yung tugon, yung ating katanungan ng ating chairman kanina po, tungkol po sa red tagging. As a general rule po, ma'am, sirs, Mr. Chair, the Armed Forces of the Philippines does not have any policy on red tagging whatsoever. Kaya po, we welcome the report or the process of filing the case, a writ of amparo before the Supreme Court by the petitioners para po kung magkaroon ng investigasyon at malaman po kung may nagkamali kaming mga tao, ay mapoprosecute po natin at pabigyan po natin ng lunas kung ano man pong kasalanan na nagawa. Yan po. Mr. Chair, I respectfully read the proposed or position paper rather of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The Armed Forces of the Philippines, as the protector of the people and state, has always been committed in upholding the rule of law, especially human rights, as reflected in the AFP's roadmap to transformation, policies, and also programs. The AFP commends the basic intent or intention of the proposed legislations, which are consistent with the values of the state. As evidence, the existing laws legal remedies, and jurisprudence which safeguards the people whether their rights are violated or threatened to be violated in times of peace or in war. The AFP is of the humble view that the current laws are sufficient not only to protect the human rights advocates in the lawful exercise of their rights, but as well as to guide government agencies, bureaus, or instrumentalities such as the National Police and the AFP in the conduct of their legitimate operations consistent with the respective mandates. In the proposed legislations, the rights and freedoms enumerated are already considered protected. Protected rights when lawfully exercised and are only subjected to certain limitations provided by law. On the other hand, the enumerated obligations imposed upon state and the public authorities are already existing in the status quo, but the provisions stated therein in this proposed law lack the necessary safeguards or limitations as such state obligations, which as a result may be used against the state to perpetuate the evil acts by individuals or groups who intend to abuse these legal loopholes. In addition, the protection of rights include the balancing of rights between the people and the state. This means that the state and the government authorities must equally be given the opportunity and legal arsenal to effectively implement the law, to protect the people, and to hold accountable those individuals or organizations who may identify themselves as human rights defenders, but actually are legal fronts of other groups to evade justice. More importantly, there are various laws that uphold human rights, such as that of, but not limited to, of course, it is basic, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights under the UN Charter, our Constitution, the Enforced and Involuntary Disappearance Act, Anti-Torture Act of 2009, the CSAC Law, or the Children in Situations of Armed Conflict, RA 9851, or the Philippine Act on the Crimes Against Violations of IHL, Genocide, and Other Crimes Against Humanity. And likewise, the aim of the bill to protect human rights defenders from potential abuse of authority of the states are already covered under the CHR's, or the Commission on Human Rights, constitutional mandate. Hence, the proposed creation of Human Rights Defenders Protection Committee is deemed to be duplication of the current CHR mandate. In the case of the AFP, in the performance of its mandate as protector of the people and the state, it has improved its collaboration with other stakeholders by engaging in various partnerships with government and non-government organizations to uphold human rights. In this pursuit, the AFP has entered into various agreements with the Commission on Human Rights that focuses on training, joint clearance system, data sharing, and monitoring of violations. The AFP also has a memorandum of understanding with the ICRC that aims to enhance the partnership and cooperation and the effective implementation of international humanitarian law, and to fully integrate and institutionalize the laws of warfare in all systems and processes in the defense establishment. When it comes to protection of human rights in the AFP, the Center for Law of Armed Conflict, the Inspector General Service, the Provost Marshal General, the whole of the military justice system, and the Office of the Ethical Standard on Public Accountability are just a few of the mechanisms of accountability that we have where complaints and violations of human rights are addressed. All of this translate, Mr. Chair, to the high trust rating and approval of the AFP, which it is enjoying right now up to the third quarter of calendar year 2020. In fact, if I may say so, the true violators of human rights are the communist terrorist group, for they have committed 1,886 human rights and IHL violations for the years 2010 to the first semester of 2022. This includes 571 employment of child combatants, 489 destruction of civilian properties or attack against non-military targets, 481 usage of the anti-personnel mines, which is internationally banned, 329 willful killings, and other IHL violations. These acts, terroristic as it is, resulted in the killing of 517 and enduring 344 individuals for a total of 861 casualties for the past 12 years. Moreover, a total of 2,443 human rights abuses from calendar years 1968 to 2009 were also collected and recorded, consolidated, which resulted to the damages of 557 destroyed civilian properties and a total of 2,795 casualties, in which 1,943 are innocent civilians. All of these incidents, Mr. Chair, were reported and submitted to various stakeholders such as the CHR, CIDG, PNP, DOJ, AO35 mechanism, CWC, and even to the United Nations, ICRC, DFA, and even to the Office of the President, to include the prosecutors and PNP regional investigators for their perusal and appropriate action. This shows that the government has existing mechanisms and processes to protect our people from violations of human rights. These are interagency committees, task forces, and executive issuances to further ensure protection of human rights, thereby rendering the passage of this bill unnecessary. In view of the foregoing, Mr. Chair, the AFP respectfully do not recommend the passage of the aforementioned proposed legislation as is. However, human rights organizations or advocates may be encouraged to engage in a dialogue with key government agencies to better implement existing laws to achieve the common goal of upholding the rule of law. Magandang umaga po.
So General, the Committee on Human Rights of this House, under my watch, will not be biased as far as human rights files are concerned. We're not only after the violations of the state actors, as has been said. You mentioned about giving information to a lot of agencies in government, but not giving information to us. We can also investigate human rights violations of these armed conflicts and these armed groups, not just the AFP. I do not want our law enforcement agencies to think na ito pong committee ng human rights dito, na ako po ang chairman, ay magiging bias lamang sa mga human rights violations ng ating state actors. Hindi po. Oo. Meron kayong mga alam na human rights violation, ito mga armed conflict na ito, tell us about it. And we shall investigate. Kasi ito papangako ko sa inyo, this committee will not be biased whatsoever. Okay ba yun?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will gladly submit those records to your company.
And by the way, if this becomes a law, this cannot be a front of any communist armed conflicts or any terrorist activities. But as to it, Hindi pwedeng maging front ito. At kung ito maging front ito, kayo nakakaalam. Hindi kami. Di ba? Kayo ang dapat mag-imbestiga dyan. Kayo ang dapat gumawa ng paraan dyan. At ang inyong tungkulin, sabihin sa amin, para naman meron kaming pwedeng gawin na kasama ninyo. I would like everyone to know that the Committee on Human Rights under my watch ay hindi po dapat in conflict with the government as far as fighting armed conflicts is concerned. May I say this right now? This representation is against any armed conflict in this country and against any violent overthrow of the government. That I can tell you right now. We want peace in this country. Lahat tayo. All right, thank you. Yes, Vice Chair.
Ito po ay good for thought lang for all. Yung binanggit ng General, kagalang-galang na General na PNP, thank you for such enlightening presentation on the part of PNP. However, yung pong sinasabi niyong mga terroristic acts, ating pong palawakin ng ating kaisipan, yung po ay marami po roon, if not all, ay revolutionary actions ng revolutionary movement sa ating bansa. Now, bakit hindi makumbinse ang revolutionary element sa ating bansa? Whether the communist, whether the secessionist Muslim movement in Mindanao. Bakit po? Isa po sa naisip na aking maliit na pag-aaral. Yung repeal ng anti-subversion law. Very noble ang intention nun. Ang intention nun is to enhance the free market of ideas. Let there be clash of ideas in our country, minus violence. Pero, it appears, yung very essence and noble intention ng repeal ng anti-subversion law is being dishonored. And this is the reason why some elements are being forced to resort to violence. So this is just my food for thought for everyone. I believe all of us here have genuine intention how to give our Filipino people a chance to experience a genuine peace in our country so that in these last days of this earth, we can give our countrymen a chance to experience genuine peace in vision and dream by God for all. Just a reminder, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Before I call Congressman Adjong to say something. General, naniniwala ka din that the communist does not have the monopoly of armed conflict. Correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yun. Sinabi po ni Vice Chair na ito pong ating bansa, democratic po tayo, komunista ka man o hindi, basta hindi ka naniniwala sa armed conflict. You could be able to discuss with us and debate with us. In fact, in 1986, siguro bata ka pa, di ka pa general. Di ba? Andun na ako sa labanan. We are actually engaged in what? In a philosophical battle with the NPA. Hinabol nga ako ng NPA. Nalagay nga ako sa liquidation list ng NPA. Number 12 ako liquidation list ng NPA. Bakit hindi ako namatay? Hindi namatay number 11. See? Ang sinasabi ko lang sa inyo, ganito, minamon ko sila. Kung nais nyo ng kapayapaan sa ating bansa, lay down your arms and debate with us on the issue of a better government. Tama ba? Yun. Uulitin ko ito, ulitin yan. Kahit ngayon. Because the communists does not help the monopoly of armed conflict. Marami tayong armed conflict dito. At kung meron siya mga komunista, lalabanan ko ng debate yan. Ipaliwanag sa akin kung mas magandang gobyerno ng komunismo. Ano? Okay ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I fully agree with your thoughts, Mr. Chair.
Sino mang congressman ng komunista rito? Debate kami sa plenary. No problem with me. Huwag lang kasama ang armed conflict. Yun lang. Yes, Congressman Joe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Perhaps among the persons here in the group, in the room, Mr. Chair, perhaps I'm the only one who is exposed to armed conflict, and I'm not proud of it. What happened, Mr. Chair, just again, let me just borrow the phrase of Brother Eddie, Congressman Eddie, Vice Chair. Food for the thought. I'd just like to put into context what happened recently in Marawi. General, even before the complete liberation of the areas then at that time during the early months of the conflict controlled by the terrorist group, we have already won in Marawi. You know why, General? Because our troops have won the support of the people. And even while the war was still ongoing inside the most affected, most battle area, the main battle area, we have already prevailed because the people supported the troops. Because, Mr. Chair, while the war was ongoing, our troops, the PNP and the military, have supported all the NGOs, all the civil society organizations who have been working to protect the residents from not only from physical harm, but those harm that may have imposed upon them against their properties, against their families, and etc. So meaning to say, there's no problem when it comes to our state actors engaging with other organizations. Organizations would promote human rights, because I've seen that firsthand during the Marawi siege. So I think, Mr. Chair, the apprehension that we heard from our partners from the security sector, to me, pardon my ignorance, it's I think the difference, sometimes conflicting definition on what state actors are. If we use organizations that may espouse violence or involve in criminal acts, but not connected with the government or not using state resources to pursue their narcissistic objectives in causing havoc and harm in our society, then they are not state actors, they're simply criminals and terrorists. So I don't see any reason, Mr. Chair, with all due respect to our uniformed men here, because we saluting, I personally continue to salute you, because we recognize that without your support, Marawi City would still be in conflict up this moment. I don't see why there is an apprehension, perhaps a fear, to accept that on the ground, and I'm not talking about the organization in itself, but some elements within the organization, even in Congress, as the chairman has said, may mga communist-leaning congressmen here. No, because these are ideological, what you call this, the association ng pagiging komunista or yung pagiging ibang klaseng ideological po ito. What we are actually putting here as a measure is for these organizations who espouse violence, hindi makakuha ng propaganda para mag-recruit pa. You know why, Mr. Chairman, bakit kanina po na-mention po ni Congressman Villanueva, ni Brother Eddie. And in fact, wala na pong Muslim secessionist po, Mr. Chairman, because the MILF and the MNLF are now partners of the government. We have already established a peace treaty, an agreement with them. Mr. Chairman, alam niyo po kung sa experience po namin, sa experience po namin, kaya po nagkakaroon ng recruitment nagiging attractive yung ideology ng mga iba na nagkukos ng anarchy sa ating society. It's because may mga mas maliliit na bagay. Maliliit lang maliliit. Ay, hindi ito ginagawa at hindi ito in-expose ng ating security sector ng mga violation. Those are used as a propaganda to attract recruits. Tinan mo nga, may ginagawa, may violation, dumaan si congressman, Abante doon sa daan, tapos hinarang sila, mismo congressman yan, ano pa kaya kung ikaw? Diba? Na ordinary pa na tao. This words of the mouth, no? Nagsispread yan, nakaka-invite yan ng recruits. Mas na-embolden sila. We are actually providing a platform. The more there are abuses, the more platform we provide to these organizations we consider terrorists or criminals. So in this way, Mr. Chair, this will be a platform for the government, for the advocates of human rights, and for our not only the security sector but all of us, no, na magkaroon ng engagement at mas mapabuti at mas mapapaganda ang imahe ng ating gobyerno. I am not being selective here, Mr. Chairman. I'm not just talking about our security forces or security sector. We are talking about the government. Because whatever our men in uniform do, it reflects to all of us. Those who are working in the government. So gusto ko yun ang mawala, yung stigma na yun. That once you are wearing barong, wearing Americana, goes to this certain office, you're automatically against human rights. And once you are, bragging your rights and voicing out your rights in the street, you're automatically anti-government. That's supposed to be, dapat yun po ang tanggalin natin sa mga isipan natin. So, ako, Mr. Chairman, I would wish that our security sector would really, make this appreciate this measure by this committee, na hindi po ito malilesen sa inyong integrity. Rather, this will give you the platform to engage with your citizenry, and then mapakita po natin that the PNP is here to protect, to serve, and to protect. That, I just want to include that, Mr. Chair po, kasi yung nangyari po sa amin sa Marawi, sa totoo lang, hindi po yun magiging successful without our troops. At ina-appreciate po namin ang kanilang tulong. But, kailangan din po natin na ma-admit na sa lahat ng organization, may mga nangyayaring pang-abuso. Sir Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Jong. Napakaganda na sinabi mo. Yes, Vice Chair Villanueva.
In addition po sa magandang remarks ni Congressman Joe, pasamantalahin ko lang po na masabi ko ito, baka hindi na maulit itong masarap na exchange of views natin. Para sa concerned representatives ng police and military forces ng ating bansa. May mga nakausap akong mga retired generals, ilang kaibigan ko. And some of them were shocked sa nangyaring solusyon sa Marawi City. Ang Marawi City, napakagandang syudad. Namatay. Hindi ko makakalimutan yung 13 newly graduates ng PMA. Pinalusog doon, patay agad. Sabi sa akin ng ilang general na retired, na naborn again ni iba. Alam mo, Brother Eddie, parang isang bahay yan eh. Yung bahay na yun, may mga nakapasok na lamok, 300, o nakapasok na 300 na langaw, o nakapasok na 300 na ahas. Bakit ang solusyon mo? Pero masakin yung bahay. Igilan mo lang yun. Gutumin mo lang yun. Laligtas yung libo-libong mga buhay. Yung multi-billion worth of infrastructures doon hanggang ngayon hindi na mabalik. Kaya napakahalaga ang free market of happiness. Napakahalaga na yung gano'n natin ang freedom of everyone, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of beliefs. Nakapoy natin ang tyranny of majority, i-apoy din natin ang tyranny of minority. Ang importante po, magkaroon tayo ng free market of ideas. Wala akong makita, Chairman Abante, ang ganda mo sabi sa akin ng ilang Brigadier Generals, bahay na maganda. Meron lang 300 na kalaban ng government. Pumasakin bigla. Bobombahin mo. At mga innocenteng bagong graduates sa PMA, 13. Mga lieutenant. Sakit nung naramdaman ng mga magulang doon. Pinapasok doon. Walang sa experience. Patay agad. Kailangan ko may iwasan natin dito. Kailan dumating na tayo sa maturity of managing the affairs of the nation, especially on the security aspect. Sinamatan ako lang po ito dahil baka hindi na ako magkaroon ng chance na sabihin ito sa mga concerned authorities. Isang malaking kamalian para sa akin yung nag-suggest kay President Duterte na gamitan ng parang mga bangang martilyong mamatay mo. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Salamat, Vice Chair. Go ahead, Comsec Scholes.
Can we call on Attorney Lourdes Isela Mendoza from the Department of Justice State Council?
Good morning, Honorable Chair. The department interposed no objection to the enactment of the subject bills into law, recognizing that it is within the legislative authority of Congress to enact laws, amend or repeal them. The department has submitted position papers on similar measures filed in the previous Congress, which indicated our observations to the previous bills, subject, of course, to the Honorable Committee's consideration. We will be submitting our official position paper on these proposed measures in due time. Thank you.
Next is Director Tito Marshall Fajardo from Presidential Human Rights.
Magandang umaga po, kagalang-galang Abante, Congressman Villanueva, Congressman Cruz, Congressman Manuel, Congressman Adyong, and Congressman Sita. Sir, we have prepared a position paper 3 days long, and also prepared a presentation. By your leave, I am allowed center. It's a colorful presentation. It's a warm and cozy presentation.
Ilang minuto po yan?
I would estimate it to be 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Or ba, kita natin? Alright, so tinan po natin. Pakitanggal mo na lang yung face mask mo. Baka human rights violation pa yan.
I'll start off, sir, that our office is always in engagement with human rights defenders. And this presentation is actually a summary of all their inputs, comments, just the cover page. Comments, inputs of human rights defenders. And our engagements with them inside Philippines, outside the Philippines, with the UN, the United Nations, with the Special Rapporteurs, with the Human Rights Council. In particular, sir, those whose concern is the right to children, child rights, or the right to family, victims, just to enumerate them, sir. So the origins of the word human rights defender comes from a document which is just published during 1998. It's a full title of it, Declaration of the Right and Responsibility of Individuals, Groups, and Organs of Society to Promote and Protect Universally Recognized Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. It's a 7-page document with 20 articles. Next slide. If you'll notice from that 7 pages, there's no term human rights defenders. It was not used in that document, but the theme of that document is inclusivity. And this is something we've been discussing this morning.
is that we all have the same thoughts on human rights defenders, and that we're all united in that thought. And the second slide, please. And thus, the UN, knowing that the declaration itself said some lacking in please a context. And this is what earlier General Calanoga had stated, UN Fact Sheet 29. Next. Is published by the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights to clarify a lot of aspects in human rights defenders and the concept itself. Next. Next. One of the things that they had stated there is that it's not really a profession. It's not a title conferred for a regulated occupation, because from their aspect, the term is very inclusive. It means all of us. All of us here are human rights defenders. As a matter of fact, next, could you please press? Their example, as earlier as you discussed earlier, sir, about your grandchild wanting to be a policeman, sir. And that was what the UN had in mind when they actually used policemen and judges as an example of a human rights defender, because a policeman is the first responder whenever the human right to life, liberty, or security of persons is threatened. And thus, sir, the UN had that in mind. And actually, in one of the draft bills, I understand that was a draft bill from Congressman Salo, he also made that provision, recognizing that the state is actually the duty bearer or the first primary human rights defender. Next slide, please. Okay, one of the key points, there's 3 key points in UN Fact Sheet 29. Could you show the whole slide? Okay, the first is acceptance and universality of human rights. That was already expressed earlier by General Naknak in his position. Advocacy, and this is only to express that this is not a title or a profession or an occupation which is regulated or given privileges between and amongst human beings. And the UN expresses that everyone is a human rights defender. It's inclusive. And the most important in that document is what we were discussing earlier about violence and conflict, is that to be a human rights defender, and this is the exact terminology used by the document itself, peaceful activities in order to comply with the Declaration of Human Rights Defenders. We were discussing this earlier, sir. I think it's a worthy thought that hate, extremist violence, and the recruitment of youth to such activities does not qualify as a human rights defenders. Because, sir, in a lot of our engagements with human rights defenders, when we engage with child rights advocates, child rights defenders, family rights defenders, they're very particular in certain aspects that children are being taken by violent extremists. And that's their advocacy. That's their human rights defenders advocacy. That is to prevent their children from being taken by violent extremists. And Congressman Adyo had earlier stated that the city, Marawi City, was a victim of this conflict, and there were some child combatants that were rescued by our state actors, being that they were acting as human rights defenders in rescuing these child combatants. Next slide, please. And this is the Philippine setting, sir. These are actually, could you please lay down the whole slide? This is what we call as the Philippine civic space. We just had an election that's 55 million voters through vying for 18,000 elected positions. And these are where our human rights defenders are from. It's either in the 101,000 registered nonprofit organizations or 60,000 NGOs that exist in the Philippines. They're all registered. And this is our civic space. That's more than 1,000 radio stations, 500 TV stations. And with regard to advocacy such as labor rights and trade unionism, we have 18,000 registered unions and 123,000 labor organizations covering more than 2 million workers. And we have a participant from the Indigenous Peoples, the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples. We have more than 5,000 indigenous mandatory representatives, and more than 1,000 indigenous people's organizations. And this topic officer were actually accommodating 1,000 political asylum seekers. And just to lay the predicate, sir, this rule is free space for us to discuss. And that was what Congressman Villanueva was saying here earlier. That's we could clash with concepts. We're free to discuss. And I understand I have friends, human rights defenders with me right now who will be conveying these same messages. We don't have to agree. We're just freely discussing amongst ourselves in a safe environment on this beautiful room, sir, with a controlled temperature and look. Next slide, please. And sir, just to give an awareness of where we are, sir, we're the Philippines. And there are, I understand there's more than 195 UN member states. And out of that 195 UN states, there's three countries which have specific laws with human rights defenders. That's Mexico, Mongolia, and Honduras. The difference between these countries and the Philippines is that their national human rights institution, or what we call here as a Commission on Human Rights, is not a constitutional body. These countries, for example, Mexico and Mongolia, established their Commission on Human Rights, or what they call in their own languages, national human rights institutions. They've merely established it through presidential decrees or laws, which would sometimes change depending on what Congress, or in our case, or the Philippines, has a very firm law establishing the Commission on Human Rights, which is the Constitution itself, sir. Next slide, please. During the 4th cycle UN Universal Periodic Review, just this November, there were 289 recommendations from 107 states. And we just enumerated the top 5 recommendations from all these 107 states. Laid out the whole. Okay. So you would notice, sir, that first of which is the ratification of human rights instruments, which will also be one of Parliament or legislature's mandates, is to ratify. Next is the access to education. This was mentioned by 21 states. I would have to say the concern of most of the states with regard to marginalized or vulnerable sectors are children and women, and thus they were expressing recommendations for the Philippines. Okay, thank you, sir. That's the last page, sir. Next page, please. Next page. Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Well, Director, you are you represent the Presidential Human Rights Committee, no?
Yes, sir.
Under the office of the President. No? I appreciate you telling us on the UN declaration.
Yes, sir.
But this representation here is not very much concerned on the UN declaration. I am concerned on the Philippine Constitution. Yun ang ating concern, di ba? I mean, declaration ng human rights ng UN, ang pag-violating yung mga gumawa. Oh, America is violating the declaration of human rights ng UN. Europe is also doing that. Tapos pipilitin ng ating bansa na i-accept lahat ang recommendations ng UN. Hindi naman siguro tama yun, di ba? Kaya sinabi ko nung isang araw na I do not believe the UN human rights. Tapos, tinira ako ng isang media network. Di ba? The thing is,
sabihin mo ko, ano na to, pa-charge na to. Pero tapos na rito.
Our concern is to be able to implement the human rights provisions of our Constitution. Yun ang ating di ba? Kaya maraming salamat din pag binanggit mo yung UN, kahapon nga, kausap namin yung rapporteur Oo. Itong si rapporteur na to, nagpunta dito, she refused to have the antigen test. Samantalang protocol ito sa Congress. Congressman, lahat, nag-antigen test. She refused it. Pinakiusapan siya palagi. For 30 minutes, she refused it. I just imagine he is the UN Human Rights Special Rapporteur violating our own human rights. My goodness. Go ahead.
We call on Attorney Ronald Satiga from EJMP. Thank you very much and good morning, Mr. Chairman and the rest of the members of the committee, Your Honors. May I be allowed to convey salient portions of our position from BJMP? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The BJMP wishes to convey its deepest appreciation to the respective authors of the House bills for protecting human rights defenders and upholding the constitutional mandate of the state values, that the state values the dignity of every human person and guarantees full respect for human rights. Human rights defenders are the frontliners in defending human rights, dignity, and democracy. They become vulnerable to attacks which basically endanger their safety and security as well as of their families. In this regard, the BJMP fully supports the proposed measures and believes that it is high time for a legislative measure to institutionalize and enforce state obligations for the protection of the rights of human rights defenders in the country. Hence, it is high time that these legislative measures that will provide protection to human rights defenders be passed into law. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Next is from the NCIP, National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, Ms. Dalia Lee Daif Cowan.
Hello. During Honorable Chair, members of this August Party, the Committee on Human Rights. I am Dalia Lee Daif Cowan. I'm the Director of the Foreign Assisted Programs and International Relations Office in the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, sir. And I am also actually at Wali of the ITSCO in Aknor. Well, for the task assigned to us to present the position paper of the NCIP, sir, I wish to inform also this body that prior to these bills, these new bills, there was also a previous position paper given to that committee, to this committee, with regard to same subject. And to contextualize the position of NCIP, I'd like also to share a glimpse, of the international landscape of what is happening to indigenous people's issues in the international arena. And in this context, also, sir and ma'am, I think I would put to fore the thesis that national issues if you talk of indigenous people, sir and ma'am, national issues cannot be separated from those that are being taken up in the United Nations, for instance, in the international development arena. And for indigenous people's issues, sir, ma'am, whether you talk of biodiversity, whether you talk of human rights, whether you talk of education, etc., it has become already a platform, of several non-government organizations in trying to blame, shame the Philippine government in the United Nations. And it is to this platform of indigenous issues that we in the NCIP is taking this position on the proposed bills. And may I please present some salient points of the position. The position, the official or the updated position of the NCIP would be submitted perhaps after the meeting, sirs and ma'am. But for some salient the points that have been submitted already, let me iterate on the following. Along the historical inclusion of the Bill of Rights, the 1999 Constitution recognizes and promotes the rights of the indigenous peoples and indigenous cultural communities over their ancestral land and domains. Expressly, it provides that the state recognizes and promotes the rights of indigenous cultural communities within the framework of national unity and development.
Thus, Republic Act 871 or the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997 was passed into law primarily to correct historical injustices committed against the indigenous peoples. IPRA, as it is popularly known, specifically provides for the four bundles of rights of indigenous peoples, namely their rights to ancestral domains, their rights to self-governance and empowerment, their rights to social justice and human rights, and their rights to cultural integrity. Specifically, it states that the state shall respect, recognize, and protect the right of indigenous peoples to preserve and protect their culture, traditions, and institutions. It also recognizes the right of ownership of indigenous peoples over the ancestral land and domains. And that is also explicitly provided under Chapter 5, which emphasizes social justice and human rights of indigenous peoples. Section 21 of the same law provides that consistent with the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines, the Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, including Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and international human rights law, the state shall, with recognition of their distinct characteristics and identity, accord to members of indigenous peoples the rights, protections, and privileges enjoyed by the rest of the citizenry. It shall extend to them the same employment rights, opportunities, basic services, educational, and other rights and privileges available to every member of the society. Accordingly, the state shall likewise ensure that the employment of any form of force or coercion against indigenous peoples shall be dealt with by law. The National Commission on Indigenous Peoples is primarily mandated to protect and promote the interests and well-being of indigenous peoples with due regard to their beliefs, customs, traditions, and institutions, which makes the agency in itself a human rights defender for the rights of indigenous peoples. As such, it shall primarily guarantee the exercise of the rights enshrined under IPRA in the performance of this mandate. Cultural integrity shall be paramount consideration. Thus, the Commission welcomes the House bills, but cautions the legislative branch that the spirit of IPRA, particularly cultural integrity, self-governance, and free prior informed consent of indigenous peoples, must be of utmost consideration. The proposed House bills are good initiatives in the attempt to articulate and reinforce the 1998 Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 144. Yet, through the lens of the indigenous cultural communities of the Philippines, and because with the current situation of ancestral domains and indigenous communities as the training grounds of basis for insurgency operations, the Commission views that the rights of indigenous peoples can be exploited by groups or individuals disguised as human rights defenders in order to access for their personal interests, therefore causing further indigenous peoples' rights violations by sustaining violent armed movement in ancestral domains. For that, given the time limit given us, sirs and ma'ams, as I articulated earlier on, we will provide a more thorough and detailed position paper of the National Commission on Indigenous.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next is IJPN, Ms. Rose Tacano, please.
Maraming salamat po. I am Rosemary Trajano from In Defense of Human Rights and Dignity Movement. And we have an initial position paper, supporting, of course, the enactment of the Human Rights Defenders Protection Bill. Medyo kinabahan po ako sa sinabi ni Chair Abante kanina na he does not really believe with the United Nations kasi ang tono po ng aming position is on UN. But of course, alam ko naman po na sa context yan, no? So, if I may, no, sir, the right to defend human rights has been formally recognized by the United Nations and enshrined in UNJ resolution, which was already mentioned, this declaration on HRDs. The declaration asserts that everyone has a responsibility towards the promotion and protection of human rights and to partake of the global movement for the fulfillment of rights for all.
In the Philippines, this recognition is hardly observed, as evidenced by the numerous cases of harassments, intimidation, sexual assault, killing of human rights defenders by state armed forces, local officials, and even private corporate armies. In the past 6 years alone, the state has wholly failed to protect human rights defenders as it vilified their work, annihilated the rule of law, shrunk the spaces in which they operate, while threatening them with violence and murder. The twin wars of drugs and terrorism further amplified the risks they faced because their opposition to these skill policies marked them as enemies of the state. During the COVID-19 pandemic, people defending people against brutal lockdown measures and those helping people access food, medical attention, financial aid, and vaccines were likewise subjected to reprisals. Yet, at the recently concluded Universal Periodic Review of the Philippines, our government claimed they are human rights defenders too. At the fourth cycle of the Universal Periodic Review, 11 countries made recommendations for the Philippines to protect human rights defenders, citing the need for a legislation and policy actions. At the fifth periodic report of the committee reviewing the implementation of the covenant
nandito katabi ko, tsaka dalawang ko kung ano yan. Dalawa kami rito. Sige, dalawang water. Sige. Kami kasi.
The state party, one, take immediate steps to ensure the protection of human rights defenders, activists, and other civil society actors to enable them to exercise and promote human rights, the safe environment. Number two, consider adopting the Human Rights Defenders Protection Bill without delay. Number three, end red tagging of human rights defenders, activists, and other civil society actors. And fourth, promptly, independently, and effectively investigate all human rights violations committed against human rights defenders, activists, and others civil society actors, bringing the perpetrators to justice and providing victims with redress, including adequate compensation. Similarly, the UN Joint Program aimed for clear outputs, namely, strengthen human rights capacity of civil society and broader area, and freedom of expression is protected and human rights defenders can conduct their activities safely. The government made commitments to human rights obligations under these international processes, although the reality is far from encouraging as intimidation and reprisal against HRDs continue. Thus, this process in the House of the Representatives undertaking to draft legislation towards human rights defenders protection bill is much anticipated, as all HRDs look forward to the day when they are truly recognized, when we are truly recognized and respected as partners in what Congressman Villanueva made mention towards a sustainable development goal capable of contributing to peace building and crafting a better future for the Philippine nation. I defend, appreciate, and fully support the House bill previously passed in 18th Congress, 10576. And as we understand, this is now House Bill 77, similar bill, which was approved which was approved and reported out by the House Committee on Human Rights in 18th Congress and subsequently approved by the House of Representatives on third reading. So yun po yung aming sinusuportahan because we think that we have really contributed and all our recommendations were included in that bill. May I also add, sir, currently we have the United Nations Joint Program. Ito po ang commitment ng ating gobyerno. Ito po ang naging tugon ng United Nations, ng government, doon sa resolution ng Human Rights Council para ayusin ang human rights situation sa Pilipinas. Kaya po itong agreement na ito kasama po dito na tina-target ang pagpasa sa Human Rights Defenders Bill, including the National Preventive Mechanism. So I urge the committee, if you can have a meeting with the United Nations Joint Program team po, para mas masalansan natin maigi ang iba't iba pang mga issues on human rights, But of course, we really appreciate that the House is now working for the enactment of a Human Rights Defenders Protection. Maraming salamat.
Salamat po. Okay po yun. Kung talaga mag-meeting tayo, kinakailangan muna, number one, vaccinated sila. Number two, magpapa-antigen test sila.
Yes, sir.
Gusto ko lang po sabihin, to clear the air, the Human Rights Defenders Bill na ito, to clear the air, will not in any way support any armed conflict. I believe that human rights defenders should be an advocate of the rule of law. Bakit kung hindi sila advocate ng rule of law, ay walang kwentang human rights defenders. Just would like you to know, But we're not going to allow any terrorism in this country. Gusto kong sabihin sa ating Philippine National Police at Armed Forces of the Philippines. Okay, kaya huwag kayong kakabahan dito. Okay? Sige.
Thank you, sir. From the Department of National Defense, Legal and Civil Affairs Department, Attorney R.J. Bean.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honorable members of the committee. The Department of National Defense, if I may be allowed to read our position statement, Mr. Chair. The Bill on Human Rights Defenders Protection presupposes that the state has no existing mechanisms to protect the rights of its citizens, protection of human rights, as well as the promotion of social justice and human dignity are very much embedded in the 1987 Philippine Constitution, which finds expressions in our laws and other policies frameworks. In terms of advocating human rights, the Philippines is also dynamic in its engagement with the international community like the United Nations. The Philippines even partnered with the United Nations in launching the UN Joint Program on Human Rights, or the UNJP on Human Rights, which aims to improve further the situation of human rights in the Philippines, to provide support for the country and the continued fulfillment of its international human rights obligation and commitments. These are some of the indications that the Philippines acknowledges the importance of human dignity and having a rights-based and people-centered development agenda. Thus, Mr. Chair, Your Honors, the Department of National Defense, it is of our view that the bills currently filed relative to human rights defenders protection are mere reiterations of existing human rights laws that we have. The rights and freedoms stated in the bills that need protecting are already safeguarded under the existing laws and other human rights-based policies and mechanisms. These are the provisions in the bills that need further review, such as the section on the obligation to respect, promote, protect, and fulfill the human rights of human rights defenders, which could serve as a deterrent in effective law enforcement operations, particularly, Mr. Chair, in the government's anti-terrorism operation against persons, associations, and groups by using a cover-up of being human rights defender. The bill also push for the creation of Human Rights Defenders Protection Committee that has investigatory powers, which we believe are already within the mandate of the Commission on Human Rights. Likewise, Mr. Chair, the bills may be potentially taken advantage of by the enemies of the state against our military and law enforcement agents in the event of their capture and subsequent prosecution. They may invoke that they are human rights defenders. As such, Your Honor, Mr. Chair, these bills may run counter to the implementation of the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. And in view thereof, Mr. Chair, Your Honor, the Department of National Defense does not recommend the passage of these bills into law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I assure you we're going to make some mechanisms to prevent that. Okay, we have the last one. Hello, okay, go ahead.
The last two speakers, Your Honor. May we have Karapatan first, Ms. Christina Calabay, to be followed by Ms. Ana Celestial, Kalikasan Philippine Network for the Environment.
If I may request sana na yung hanggang salient sabihin nyo, because you will submit naman to us the issue papers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are appreciative of the chair's opening statements, and we fully agree with you that the support for this measure is not only very welcome but is long overdue. And to answer po your question in relation to what specific laws in our body of laws are pertain to human rights defenders, it's Section 8, sir, of the 1987 Constitution. But the chair is very correct when he said that that certain provision needs to be fleshed out in our body of laws, because there is no specific law that recognizes and protects human rights defenders. And this is why we welcome House Bill number 77 and 256 and 2484, which are the measures for the recognition and protection of human rights defenders. May I say, sir, and members of the committee, that these measures are products of the long history and practice of human rights work in the Philippines. 2007 pa po, naka-file ang unang version nito. And it is 24 years ago when the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, from which the Philippines is a state party, we signed on to it, has been there. I'd also like to emphasize, sir, that 40 states in the UN Universal Periodic Review have called for justice and protection of the rights of human rights defenders and journalists in the Philippines, and 6 countries have called for the enactment of this specific legislation. Several independent experts have also voiced out concerns. The explanatory notes in the proposed legislation illustrate the situation of human rights defenders and the dire need for a domestic remedy. Today, Karapatan has documented 937 human rights defenders who were victims of extrajudicial killings by suspected state actors since 2001. 70 of them, sir, 70, are our human rights workers. Thousands more experienced judicial harassment, arbitrary arrest and detention, threats and harassment, online and offline, reprisals, and other numerous forms of human rights violations. We commend po the bill's enumeration and clarity in defining the rights of human rights defenders, specifically sections on the right to form organizations, associations, and groups, to seek and receive and disseminate information, the right against intimidation, reprisals, defamation, stigmatization, the right to be secure in academic institutions, the right to privacy and to participate in public affairs, among others. We also appreciate that the extraordinary due diligence, there's a provision there, sir, on extraordinary due diligence was emphasized as among the necessary guiding principles. Because, sir, we have many complaints that have been filed. It's so many, and perhaps po, it can fill the whole book. We filed it before the Commission on Human Rights. Marami pong nakafile sa courts. But these complaints get to nowhere. That's why we also support the statement of the chair, the opening statement, that in relation to Task Force 8035, we really need to push for successful prosecutions. Kasi pag wala po yung successful prosecutions, impunity po ang ibig sabihin nun. And pag hindi po napapunish ang perpetrators, I think hindi lang po sa Pilipinas, sa buong mundo, nauulit, may repetition of crimes. And that's how impunity persists. We also note po that in the 17th and 18th Congress, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, sa totoo lang po, 2 kongreso na nag-PWG po kami tungkol po dito. At ang dami na pong diskusyon, sa totoo lang. At mayaman po yung mga debates, which includes issues raised by the Philippine National Police, ng Department of Justice. Kaya po sa tingin namin, yung consolidated version po ng 3 proposed measures have gone through an extensive discussion, have been approved by the committee and at the 3rd reading, and especially with our commitments in the implementation of the UN Joint Program on Technical Cooperation and Capacity Building. We hope that the measures be similarly approved fast-track ngayon pong 19th Congress. Maraming pong salamat.
Thank you, Ms. Palambay. Salamat, maraming salamat.
From Kalikasan, please.
Thank you, Chair, for this privilege of being able to present our position. Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment, we welcomes ongoing deliberations by this committee towards passage of legislation upholding the basic rights and democratic freedoms of Filipinos and protecting and upholding the rights of human rights defenders in particular. As environmental advocates and activists, we belong to a particular group of human rights defenders called Environmental Human Rights Defenders. This was first defined by UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of HRDs, Michael Forst, in 2016. As individuals and groups who, in their personal or professional capacity and in a peaceful manner, strive to protect and promote human rights relating to the environment, including water, air, land, flora, and fauna. The UN Human Rights Council subsequently recognized the contribution of environmental human rights defenders to the enjoyment of human rights, environmental protection, and sustainable development in 2019. In the Philippines, frontline environmental human rights defenders include indigenous peoples who use their traditional knowledge and practices to protect the ecology and sustainability of their ancestral lands, farmers who want to improve the health and productivity of their lands and livelihoods, and fisherfolk who want to ensure a sustainable catch. Environmental human rights defenders are also vital in protecting and conserving resource-rich ecosystems and ensure that they are rehabilitated. Based on our estimates, Filipino environmental human rights defenders have protected 1.8 million hectares of seascapes and 4.4 million hectares of landscapes. But despite our efforts to uphold the newly recognized right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, we are facing increasing attacks. The past decade alone found 270 environmental human rights defenders killed in the country, making us Asia's deadliest country for land and environmental defenders. For this year alone, we have monitored rights violations against 516 environmental human rights defenders and their organizations that follow a trend of red tagging, vilification, and other forms of threats and harassment, illegal arrest and detention, physical assault, and include extrajudicial killings. That is why we support the swift passage of House Bill 77, 256, and 2484, or the Human Rights Defenders Protection Act. This will greatly help provide a safe and enabling environment for us, environmental human rights defenders, to operate without fear and do our work of ensuring sustainable and inclusive natural resource management and development. Every day that we do not enact protections for environmental human rights defenders translates to a new attack on an environmental human rights defender and their families, communities, and organizations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. To our Philippine National Police results, for people, no, and the ASP, what Ms. Palabay and Ms. Celestial has said today must be taken with objectivity. Not bias, diba? I mean, I sympathize with all of those victims. Meron tayong mga tuktok dyan na biktima, no? Ang request ko lamang sa ating mga state actors and enforcement agency. Please look at this in positivity and objectivity. We can help you on that. Diba? I think that we ought to be addressed now. Ako po ay naging unang-unang chairman ng Human Rights in 2004. Hindi ko pinili itong committee ito. Ibinigay sa akin to, hindi ko alam kung bakit. At bilang bishop, sinabi ko na lang na ito intensyon ng Diyos para ako maging chairman dito. Ayaw ko to. Oo. Anyway, ipaglalaban natin ang anumang human rights actions dito. Di ba? Ang nais ko lang sana sa ating mga human rights people, hindi ko alam kung bakit gusto nyo banggitin yung UN. You know, I mean, that's not gospel truth. What the UN is saying is not gospel truth. It's not perfect. Di ba? I mean, you know, as far as I'm concerned, even those people that did the declaration were also violators of human rights in their own countries. Hindi pwedeng ipilit sa atin dito yan. Ang concern natin is for every Filipino to follow our constitutional mandate. Yun ang nais natin. Is always the Philippine Constitution and kung ano ang nararapat sa mga Pilipino. You know, in the last Congress, I think in the 13th Congress, I spoke against the USA. Oh, kasama ko pa si Castro. Ang sabi sa akin ni Castro, anti-American ka rin pala. Sabi ko sa kanya, hindi ako anti-American. Pro-Pilipino ako. Pro-Pilipino ako. Dapat ganun tayong lahat. Hindi anti-American, hindi anti-Chinese, kundi pro-Pilipino. You see, yun dapat tayo. Yun ang Human Rights Defenders Bill. Must be pro-Filipino human rights. Pero po tayong huli. Okay. Vice Chair would like to say something.
Gusto ko lang pong ihabol. Nangihinayang ako na ang current Congress Committee on Human Rights under the watch of highly esteemed Christian leader in our country, Bishop Abante, would fail in his dream to really contribute something that is significant in resolving this issue. Akin pong gustong ipaalala sa lahat, lalo na rin sa mga kumukontra dito sa bill na ito, nabanggit po ninyo kanina, may mga existing laws na in defending the human rights defenders. So, ibig sabihin na you're in favor of defending the human rights defenders. Why oppose the seemingly even granting for the sake argument na additional laws ito to protect the human rights defenders? Why oppose? Dahil lahat tayo, willing tayo. The fact that we are quoting the existence of other specific laws defending human rights, I think, walang masama na magdagdag pa kung meron mong may dadagdag to perfect the security and defense of legitimate human rights defenders. On the other hand, meron pa kayong kinakatakot na may provision ba rin sa bill na ito na maaaring gamitin to harass the members of the military or police system. Hindi po natin papayagan yun. I will stand on what is right and what is just, together with Chairman Abante. So tingnan po natin kung meron namang may excessive provisions ba dito sa bill na ito na pwedeng gamitin naman in harassing the members of the military or members of the police system in our country, mali naman po yun. So, pagbigyan po natin ang noble intention ng chairman ng committee. At maranasan man natin, hindi pa natin naranasan genuine peace in our society. May mga nag-agree, nag-disagree, pero genuine yung tinatawag na free market of ideas minus violence. Yun na po, thank you.
Salamat, Conference. Please call the last one.
May request from Ms. Cecil Baelio.
Good day, everyone. Honorable Chair, committee members. I will be sharing some of the salient points of the position paper of the families of victims of involuntary disappearance. Protection of human rights defenders is crucial to the promotion and fulfillment of human rights. To defend human rights is inherently human. The promotion and fulfillment of human rights in the country involves the empowerment of the people in defense of human rights and the rule of law. The families of victims of involuntary disappearance, FIND, is driven by the steadfast search for truth and justice for the thousands of principled and committed activists who have been forcibly disappeared through decades, thus transforming family members of the disappeared to become human rights defenders themselves. FIND strongly urges the government to enact and fully implement a human rights defenders protection law to attend to these victim families in their long-run search for truth and elusive justice. In fact, HRDs and organizations dedicated to ending enforced disappearances and other human rights violations need to be protected. The enactment of a human rights defenders protection law is long overdue. The role and work of HRDs become more significant amid the deepening human rights crisis in the country, yet many are unaware of the HRD's invaluable contribution to upholding human dignity in these trying times. Notwithstanding constant vilification, intimidation, and reprisal from the state and its duty bearers, HRDs remain resolute in their avowed commitment to protect and promote human rights. Consequently, they face increased vulnerability to various forms of human rights violations. Hence, the imperative of a strong and effective law that guarantees protection of the rights of HRDs reinforced by legally mandated responsibilities of public authorities to ensure enjoyment of these rights. With this, FIND strongly endorses House Bill number 77, introduced by Representative Lagman. FIND urges the House Committee on Human Rights to prioritize and fast-track the approval of this measure, not only to respond to the urgent need of HRDs for legal protection, but to break the record of impunity. It took 16 years for the Anti-Disappearance Law to be enacted, 22 years for the Anti-Torture Act, while an anti-extrajudicial killing law has yet to be enacted. FIND hopes that the Philippines would soon join the ranks of Honduras, Mexico, Mongolia, and other states that have stepped up in their human rights commitments and enacted human rights defenders protection laws. Ultimately, and to end this, we call for the protection and not persecution of human rights defenders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, we just would like to request that your position papers should be submitted to us, particularly of the Karapatan, the Bureau of Jail. That's the thing, no? Okay. Also, we will not anymore, hear the statement of the NCCP. Please submit to us the position papers. Okay. Now, hearing everyone here today, whether in favor or not, maraming salamat po. Kahit piliin nyo nga ng pagkakataon, bagay namin kayong lahat. Napakahalaga po ng mga sinabi ninyo. That will be considered. As much as we have 4 bills of the same measure, no? We will be creating a TWG. And may I add, alam ko, additional gawain to Congressman Adjo na willing to chair the TWG on this issue.
Mr. Chair, it will be an honor. Especially coming from the Villanueva.
Maraming salamat at ikaw na lang ang mag-organize niyan. And the TWG will study this with some others that Congressman Joe would like him to join, and afterwards we will consolidate the 4 bills into one. So in principle, I would like to ask any member to make a motion in principle to approve this bill after all of the consolidation. Is there any motion for that?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consolidate the bills, the four bills to approve, subject to further amendments because we are creating a region.
Okay, any second? Okay, there is a motion made and second. Any objection? Hearing none, since approved. Thank you very much. Ito muna tingin natin, no? We have already in principle approved the first measure. We are also going to approve the second measure this time, but let's have a 5-minute break muna. No, ha? Para mas mabiging maganda ito. Maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Dito mo na ako. Kaya